So the last time I did a BBC, I shared two of the verses from Shantideva's Engaging in a Bodhisattva Deeds that I kind of unpacked on a retreat, a little retreat that I did here at the Abbey back in October. I find these verses just extraordinarily helpful, but they do require unpacking them and sort of owning them for yourself. So I found two more verses that I wanted to share today. And one of the things that Shantideva does that I really find very helpful is on some of the verses, not many, he's got this juxtaposition between how does an ordinary childish mind think about things and how does a holy being think about things. And I find this both humbling because it kind of gives me a reality check where I am, but it also is inspiring because it gives me an idea of where I'm going. So there are two verses still in chapter 1, which I love chapter 1. It's all about benefits of bodhicitta, that I want to unpack a little bit. Venerable did short commentary on this, so I had to kind of work it into my purview with her help. So it's verse 32 and 33. The world honors as virtuous a man who procures mediocre food and for an instant gives it disrespectfully to a small number of beings that satisfies them for only half a day. What need be said then of one who constantly bestows the unsurpassed bliss of the Sagatas for a long time upon countless sentient beings fulfilling all of their hopes? Now, it was very interesting, and I had to do a little bit of research on this, but the first image that I thought of when I read verse 32 was October 2017. Hurricane Maria had just devastated the island of Puerto Rico, and our former President Trump went down to survey the damage. And there's a well-known video of him tossing paper towels into a room of people. Now, I don't want to impute anything on our former president. He said they were very high-quality paper towels, and he was having fun with the people. But for me personally, it was like, did this really serve the people of Puerto Rico? So that was the first image I got with this first verse about the mediocre food and just respectfully the small number of beings, to only help them who knows how, after they had lost their roads, their houses, their water. So I was a little puzzled by the video. But anyway, it did bring me back to my own sense of self-promotion. I mean, it's not just paper towels. When I'm looking for praise and I'm looking for reputation, I can put a spin on just about anything to make myself look good. And if I'm going for praise and reputation, somehow by doing a small, kind gesture to be able to toot my own horn, and even better, to get somebody else to toot it for me. Any small gesture of kindness. I'm really examining how much that unconsciously sort of kind of moves into my kind heart that wants to help. And so compared to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, paper towels are how much sentient beings can really benefit each other in samsara. That's metaphorically, that's kind of our level. Where with Bodhisattvas and Buddhas, a whole different level. And that the suffering and needs of sentient beings are so much greater than we can actually ever deal with. So then the big issue comes, well, what we can do to help. What's our motivation? So this verse really made me start looking at what is my motivation when I seek to help and take care of people. Am I trying to look good? Am I trying to appear altruistic when in fact the 8 worldly concerns are really driving my intention? It's a temporary solution, it's helpful, but why am I doing it? So this verse really had me do some very, very honest self-evaluation on what my motivations are. So then in the commentary, Venerable then says, well, a bodhisattva, I mean, how can one bodhisattva help all sentient beings? And she says it's not that bodhisattvas are dishing out worldly happiness all the time, because they run into this problem with us in that we don't accept the help. Some of us are great at giving and we're horrible at receiving. So not only do we not, our minds are closed to either accepting any help from them, but we don't thank them, we're not grateful towards them. Sometimes we could even punch them in the face for being kind to us. So to understand that they run up against that with us. And what's beautiful about it is that our refusal to receive help or to thank them does not deter them in the slightest. I mean, they have lifetimes to get our attention. They're not going anywhere. So that is really important, that the fortitude and compassion that they have to see us creating suffering that we don't have to create unnecessarily for ourselves and for others, if there isn't any other motivation greater than that for them to continue to show up, no matter how hard it is to get our attention, how much we don't even recognize the goodness and the guidance that they supply for us. And for us, when we give from our hearts like bodhisattvas, there is no guarantee that we will be thanked. There will be no guarantee that there'll be any gratitude coming toward our way. And of course, the question is, should that matter if we're giving with a kind heart and giving with delight? Well, it shouldn't. But I've got to tell you that there's sometimes having a grateful recipient is kind of a nice experience to have. So Venerable then uses Maitreya as a little analogy. She says, if Maitreya came and in kitty language, he would come to Maitreya and say, can you chill out a little bit and see if you can live up to your name? She says, do you think Maitreya would listen? In cat language. She'd probably run away. But to Maitreya, it wouldn't matter. He loves her, he cares for her, and he will do whatever he can to benefit her, irregardless of her response. So this verse helped me to remember, and the second verse is that no matter how little I can do, is to always remember, even if I am not given any sort of appreciation or gratitude, which I have, it's one of my big hooks, is praise and having a good reputation, is to do it with the bodhicitta mind, because it is going to fuel me on my path as far as becoming awakened. And so every little measure that I can with the bodhicitta mind, no matter what I give, no matter what the response is, that I really want to hold that as something that I am much more conscientious about, the self-promotion, really pay attention to my intention. And then what Venerable says is that for the time being, bodhicitta pulls our mind out of two ways of thinking. First way of thinking is that sentient beings are hopeless, there's too much suffering, there's too much greed, there's too much climate crisis, I can't handle it, it's too much. Other beings don't listen to me anyway, okay? So that's one side of the extreme. This is the point where she says we're creatures of extremes. This is one of the extremes. The other one is that we want utopia. We want things to be fine and sweet and tidy and all to our liking. And we put a lot of energy trying to keep suffering at bay, to have the world be nice and well-behaved in giving us what we want. And a lot of times for me, when I'm in that kind of mode, I don't really have any interest in benefiting others. I get into a place of more apathy and more entitlement when I'm cruising along if I'm not careful. So she says, we have both of these things, and both of these views are unrealistic. The thought that life should be wonderful and that I can flatter or navigate my way in order to avoid suffering is just as unrealistic as saying that the world is going to hell in a handbasket. So on one level, we've got, just make it comfortable, make it nice, behave yourself, do things tidy, or the sky is falling. So both of those things are unrealistic. And if we're not careful, the one of them is going to put us into complacency and a sense of entitlement, and the other one's just going to depress us. And both of them will paralyze us when it comes to really being able to benefit, to really being able to serve the world and to really help our practice. Now, one of the things that I did, because I wanted to, okay, I know I've got both of those extremes. I tend to go on the side of depression and despair. I'm working on getting a little bit more balanced. But what I thought about is that, samsara is our playing field right now. It doesn't have to be the field of extremes, as I've just described. Because the precious human life, the best of all realms to practice, with just enough suffering, just enough dukkha, but yet just enough happiness. So I thought about this, even though it's an impermanent phenomenon, this place in the human realm where we get to understand both of those things, is that there is a still point between the two of those things that our practice can help us to find and hold on to those moments with our practice when we're growing the understanding of what we have before us, this precious human life, what we can do, and to use that. And on the moments that I've been able to hold that balance point on just enough suffering, just enough happiness, I've been able to really see fruits of my practice by holding that place. And it comes and it goes. It's not there all the time. But I think part of our practice is to really understand, and that's the genius of the Dharma. I think particularly bodhicitta. It really gets us to get our compass honed in on where's that place where I feel enough to fuel my renunciation, but I still have enough joy, to be able to fuel my bodhicitta. And so I wanted to get out of the extreme to go to the place that we really, really have a possibility of, to find that impermanent balance point, which changes moment by moment. And so there is great suffering in the world, and there is great hope. And we can make the enlightening activities of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, with all of their minds of infinite compassion and bodhicitta, we can make it very, very personal. And Venerable has this little line in her commentary. She says, by imagining them putting us in difficult situations to give us the opportunity to dig deep and grow our bodhicitta to work for the good of others. What would it be like if we could see the world like that? That every time we have a difficulty that presents itself in our life, to see that person or object as a bodhisattva who's helping us to create the causes to be able to become a bodhisattva in the future and a Buddha farther on the path, to see it as a gift, an invitation to find that balance point, using difficulties as steps on the path rather than a problem that somebody else is creating for me that I have to deal with, which then instead of hanging off in the balance point, we're going on some detour somewhere. And who knows who bodhisattvas are anyway? I find that to be an extraordinary thought. If they say that there are Buddhas numberless as atoms, each amongst a host of bodhisattvas, am I confident that that sphere of reality is actually that way? And so I happen to find that fact that when I run into difficulties in the world, that this could be a bodhisattva guiding me specifically on what I need to learn. So practicing each day with a bodhicitta motivation, with sincerity and focus, the way I look at it too is when I'm in those moments, I can actually create a little opening for the holy beings to step into my life, as short as it might be, to benefit me wherever I am. And given their wisdom and their skillful means and their compassion, I don't think they would be throwing paper towels at me. They might hit me over the head with one of them to get my attention. But I want to be able to see that when I really am using my practice and seeing the fruits of my practice, I want to imagine that that is an opening for a holy being to come in and make a karmic connection with him. So a lot of my practice, like when I go into town and people come here at the Abbey, I set a very, very firm motivation that the benefit, however long or short it is, may I make a karmic connection with this being, so that in the future, when I'm somewhere, long time from now, on the path of accumulation, preparation, whatever, that I will find them again. So when I go into town, I go with our mechanics and our vet and the people at the bank, I make a very strong eye contact. I call their name, I mention their name, I thank them, I say something, and I leave saying, may I find you again, somewhere in the future when I have the capacity to really help you. And so these verses have really helped me to commit to making as many of these connections as I can, and that when I find them, may I be of the greatest benefit. So right now, I'm more like the mediocre person, kind of giving what I can. But what need is there to say as we move along the path? We'll be able to have greater and greater capacity, be of the greatest benefit, and to use this time, this balance between suffering and happiness, to be able to cultivate the path as best as we can.